I want to read you a story by Kurt Vonnegut, a short story. In the beginning, God created the earth, and he looked upon it all with his cosmic loneliness. And God said, let us make living creatures out of mud, so mud can see what we have done. And God created every creature that now moveth, and one was man. Mud as man alone could speak. God leaned close to mud as man stood up, looked around and spoke. Man blinked. What is the purpose of all this? He asked politely. Everything must have a purpose? Asked God. Certainly, said man. Then I leave it to you to think of one for all of this. God. So, I think that's our problem, right? We're in the middle here between angels and animals. I don't think the angels worry about their purpose, and I don't think animals can. But we do. We wake up somewhere in our life and we wonder, what's my purpose? As Nietzsche said, we can endure if we know the why, we can endure anyhow. And the problem with us is that for our minds, we need to know the why, right? And so we have been placed in this hierarchy of beings, perhaps the only place in the hierarchy of being where we ask the question, what is my purpose? And we do it. And to live a life well, as Nancy and I were trying to figure out over the last few weeks, to live a well-lived life, you pretty much need to answer that question. And it's on the minds of many people, I know. The reason I know this is I was watching a 2006 interview with Rick Warren, who wrote the book, The Purpose-Driven Life, right? At the time, it was selling 1 million copies a month. It was the largest selling book in the world 3 years in a row. Perhaps more since then. People want to know, what's my purpose? Right? Now, if you listen to what Nancy said, a lot of people have answers. Your purpose is to be useful, to be helpful, to be a good citizen, and to not worry about your own happiness, or you're supposed to be happy. Which is it? Gandhi said something similar. He said, what we do is not that important, but it is very important that we do it. And therein lies the paradox. There's a good chance that there's going to be no one who can tell you your purpose at all. They can hint, they can lead, they can give you your best guess, but only you who sit within your own being can actually define that answer, can give the final answer to the question, what is my purpose? I don't think this is really a bad thing. It's just disturbing. Just makes us work toward it. And one of the things it makes us do is come back in toward looking to see who we really are. And I did this talk just a couple hours ago. It took me 30 minutes to get to this point, but I'm going to tell you the answer right now. I'm not sure what we're going to do with the rest of the time, but basically, here's our problem, I think. We have a crust overlay of the divine essence of who we are. This crust overlay has been aided and abetted by church, by lots of people, and just by the natural tendency of paying more attention to the wrong than to the right. So we have this crusty overlay that says there's something wrong with us, that we're inadequate, that we're at fault. And the church kind of summed it up quite simply, is that you're sinners, right? And, 1,000 years goes by, you're sinners, you're sinners. It's a great affirmation, doesn't it? I'm a sinner. This thing goes deeper and deeper, and collectively it's in our psyche pretty deep. That we are sinners, and that if we're not sinners, we're dust. Nice combination, right? Dusty sinners. That's who we are. And so we have this overlay, but there's this pearl of great price that Jesus was talking about. There's a pearl of great price that is within you. This is the Tahiti that Nancy was talking about, that is surrounded by the horrors of a half-lived life. And the half-lived life is the half-lie of that you have made mistakes and that defines you. Because of course you make mistakes. But of course you fail to be the most adequate person that you could be. Yes, of course you do. But that makes you a sinner or dust is the other half, is the lie. And we live our lives half well when that becomes our definition. When we stay at the crust level and do not get to the core of who we are, we live in a horrible sea of misperception. And that misperception causes us to feel inadequate as we are, to not be brave, to not be able to know who we are because we can't look beyond it to see the core of who we are, and to not express that core fully because that cannot be what we are cannot be safely expressed in life because we know we are these dusty sinners. And that we don't have the right goods. There's something wrong with us. We can't express it. And if that was not enough, we know that we're not probably very acceptable to society around us with that being that crusty thing. So we put a pretty face on it. Or as they say in Portlandia, we put a bird on it. Right? Make it nice. So we put a face that we think society can handle out there on the surface. And we try to act in such a way that we will be liked. Because we've decided that liked at least is some success and some happiness, and we can be accepted. Or we might rebel, and we might have another false face where we try to get everybody to hate us to prove that we are a dusty sinner. But generally we have a false face that we put out there, the persona. The persona that is the face we show the public. Beneath that face is the fear that you'll see who I really am, because we've not been able to see past the crust to who we really, really are. And therefore we do this dance for the public so that we can be at least tolerable to ourselves and to others, because we don't really want to show this crust, which we take to be ourselves instead of... But the truth is we're really much brighter and shinier than that. And the missing that perception of this bright and shiny truth of who you are has caused us over the years to suffer greatly. And it makes it very difficult to find your purpose. Because your purpose obviously isn't this thin layer on the top. It might turn out that you're doing exactly what you should be doing, but it will feel differently when you're connected with the core of who you are. This will feel like I'm on purpose. Even though you may be doing the very same things you were doing before, you now would be doing it with purpose and passion. And the passion will drive you past any how that you need to be successful as yourself. Now, I'd like to say that I can't speak with the voice of God like Kurt Vonnegut, but I do want to say this, that I think that the God that makes the most sense is the God of emanation, rather than the God that made clay and made it into a person. But essentially that God emanates, in other words, injects itself out into manifestation as all that you see, including the person sitting next to you. And oddly enough for them, it's you, right? God emanates as you. And as God emanates as you, then God has one big purpose in doing that, is to express itself as you. Right? Just as it expresses itself as a tree or as the sun, It needs expression to have the full experience of being God. I mean, what fun is it to be undifferentiated perfection all the time? I get so bored. I mean, this is why the story is that God decided, hey, I'd like to have an experience of being God. So the only way to have an experience of being God is to kind of not be all of who I am, but to be in particular parts and to express as that, and to have them see themselves as me. And then, oh, wow, we'll both have the whole thing. We'll have the whole package. We'll be there. To recognize themselves as God, that is the ultimate outcome of all this design that you see here, this enormous structure, the shapes and colors and everything. It's like, so you can see it. I've had this vision lately running through my head. It hit me just a while back that we're not really individuals, and that's never been the point. We have having an identity has never been the point. The point is this flash of insight. That's all it's really about. Your identity means nothing in this game. What really matters is this flash of insight that creation has. It goes, oh my God, I'm God. That's all. Then the identity disappears and you're back to being God, right? So having an identity doesn't mean squat, except when you're in your position right now as a human being. Because the frogs don't need it, and the cherubim don't need it, but we do. We need to know what we're up to. That's because we probably have achieved a certain level of awareness and not higher and not lower. And at the level at which we are, we need a purpose. And I'm going to make it really simple for you. If you're an emanation of God, then what you really need to do is emanate being God. As you. As who you are, not as somebody else. Not as your face, not as the one that society will like or maybe despise, depending on how you wanted to play that game. But as you. As the who you really are. This core that is deeper than the crust, this is you. And to express that fully in your uniqueness, and you are unique. You express that fully, that is your purpose. And no one knows how to do that but you. And no one knows how to tell you what your purpose is, but you can find it. And maybe your friends know long before you do. Do you know what I mean? It happened to me. I mean, everybody thought I would be a minister long before I did. Right? 5 years of seminary, and I didn't think I was going to be a minister. How stupid do you have to be? Right? But here I am. And many times that's inevitable. What you become is inevitable. It draws you out. You can't miss it. It's just like you might be the last to know, but it's coming, right? You're there. You're into it. But this is, but to really embrace it is the trick. To be purposeful, not to be accidental only. At some point, to be purposefully on your purpose, rather than just going, well, I hope this is working. Because when we feel that purpose, there is this power that comes through us. This ability that people can catch, that, oh, they're on purpose. You know, you really see people that they say, oh, he or she is really on purpose, right? And you define them against the guy who's not, right? The wanderer who doesn't really know yet, who's might be a really decent person, but can't seem to find their purpose. This is, you feel for them, right? They feel for themselves. Now, the whole of creation probably doesn't deal with this, but we do as human beings. This is something we care about. What is our purpose? So, one way to look for it is, how are you wired? What's fun for you? what engages you, what's stimulating, what's powerful for you, what draws you forward. What are you good at? How do you make other people's lives better at doing it? What gives you pleasure? What gives the world pleasure? This is kind of a way of doing it. It kind of cuts down a lot of things that you probably don't have to worry about. Right? I'm not going to be an astronaut. Right? Last week I talked about my friends that were rock climbers. I'm not going to be a rock climber. I have the wrong body type, but I also have a fear of falling. It's not for me, right? It's pretty easy. But a kayaker, I could do that. So when my passion was kayaking, man, I was all over it like a cheap suit. It was what I was doing, right? And no one would say, I mean, my parents thought I was off purpose, but I think I dare say I was on target. For me at the time. And so actually, what you're supposed to be doing could be changing over time, right? Rick Warren, you know Rick Warren, the guy who wrote A Purpose-Driven Life. He's a minister. Rick Warren had to deal with, what do you do when you sell 100 million copies of a book? What do you do with that? Now he's famous. Now he's rich. Now what do you do? Very different than being a pastor of a church. I can guarantee you that. So, so what do you do when you get in that position? It was a problem for him to solve, to find his purpose. And essentially he came up with this idea, which I think is actually works religiously for him, but also works because it's the core of who he is. He said, I was reading the Bible and it said, your job then is to, if you can speak, is to speak for the poor, for the disenfranchised, for the margin of the society. If you have power, then you take care of the powerless. That's your job. So that's what he's done, right? That's what he did. Gives away 90% of his income, paid the church back everything he'd ever made from the church. So money's not the issue. He says, now what do you do with the fame that comes with being the guy who wrote the most popular book in history? What do you do with that? I don't know. But he has a chance. And so he told this story. I like this story. It's a Moses story. He said, so Moses is going to the burning bush and God says, what's in your hand? And Moses has the staff of a shepherd in there. He says, it's my staff. He says, throw it on the ground. So he throws it on the ground, and if you know the story, it turns into a snake. And then God says, pick it up. He picks it up, it becomes a staff again. Rick Warren's interpretation of this was, what do you have in your hand? It's the question we all could ask. What do we have in our hand? So, what is your identity? So a shepherd's identity is defined by his staff. He has a staff. That's how he knows who he is. He's a shepherd. And so what does he do? He moves sheep from left to right by hook or by crook. Right? That's the staff. And what does it do? It also signifies his wealth. Where's his wealth? His wealth is in sheep. Makes sense? Right? See if there's one third part in there, but look at your life. What do you have? What are you doing? What's your identity? That's a beginning. Do you know what I mean? A person in the United States is not likely to be a shepherd. So this one may not apply directly, but you're going to have to infer something here. What is your identity? Where's your wealth? Right? And he might also say, what do you care about? So a shepherd really cares about his sheep. So, ask those questions. That might be another way of getting to your purpose. What can you do? So he said he went to talk to the NBA. at the All-Stars game, he went to talk to the players, and he says, "So, what's your staff?" And they said, "Well, he says, don't worry, I'll answer the question. It's your basketball. You're a basketball player. That's your NBA basketball players. And where's your wealth from playing the game? So now, where's your influence? It's by being a player in the NBA for the rest of your life. You'll always be known as an NBA player. And people will listen to you about some things in particular because you're that player. So because you now have influence, you have the ability to influence other people. How will you use it? That's your purpose. So that's another way of thinking about it. What's your identity? Where's your wealth? And where's your influence? So we've got two of those kind of things going. What are you passionate about? Where are other people happy that you're helping? Where do you make a difference in the world? Kind of the same thing. You may figure out your own criteria. I want to talk about something that Nancy mentioned. We were in California. I want to contrast two people that I adore, both of these guys. One of them is a friend of mine who was a draft dodger. And his own mother was going to turn him in. And so he never has been able to go home or even call up until Carter gave amnesty to the Vietnam draft dodger. So he was basically on his own, really on his own, moved to Canada, etc. But as a really inventive guy, he did lots of things. He was a professional poker player, but he also grew dope and grew a lot of dope and made a lot of money and stashed it away. And since then, this is a long time ago, he's been living off that money. And he is the most interesting guy you'll ever meet. Last career he had was he had a sailboat almost in Tahiti, really, for that matter. I think he last made it as far as Hawaii. And he modified this boat. He lived on it for 10 years. Now he's doing mountain biking, lives in a truck. I said, "How much does it cost for you to live?" He says, "Well, when I was on my boat, it cost more. Right now, it costs me $20,000 a year." He lives under the radar completely. He is enormously happy. He's a joy to be around. He knows more about whatever he's been into than anyone else in the field. He knows everything about it. When he does it, he does it. He was a climber. He was a kayaker. He was a sailor. He was a poker player. He was a dope grower. Whatever he does a great thing. He does it really well. He, by contrast, has had a singular life all to himself, except that everybody who knows him just loves this guy. Because he's always got a smile on his face, for one. And that doesn't come around very often, does it? What a relief to see somebody who loves what he's doing and has always loved what he's doing. I've known him for 40 years. He's been loving what he's doing his whole 40 years. That's impressive. He gets a check mark in my book just for doing that. The other guy was Yvon Chouinard. I was telling you all about him last week. You know, this guy who started out as a climber. I just read an article. In the article, he said he ate cat food, cans of dented cat food for a long period of time so he could afford to climb. I have a better story than that. He and his friends in Yosemite Valley used to go around. They had a problem with bears a long time ago. They used to go around and make bear sounds at night and then raid people's coolers. And now the guy, out of the course of just doing what he wanted to do, what was his passion about doing, which was climbing, and then about making gear, and then he started making clothes, and clothing started to take off, and then he made Patagonia. And Patagonia, I read in this article, does $800 million worth of sales a year, and it's owned by Yvon and his wife. So you do the math and just realize that successful garment companies have a pretty high profit margin. Right? So what has he had to deal with now, instead of being a cat nipper, he's got to be the guy that deals with fame and money. And like most of these guys that I really respect with fame and money, when you get so much, you start to give it away. And so he's given away, well, I told you, he bought up a good deal of chili. Both these guys are lovable for being exactly who they are, and they have taken very different tracks, right? Some of my other friends out there, one guy was going to be was admitted to Columbia Law School and decided he was going to go to Aspen instead and be a ski instructor. And now he's been a guide. He's guided up all the highest peaks of each continent. And so, he led people up Everest, Aconcagua, etc. Pretty impressive. The other guy was going to follow in his father's footstep and be an investment banker in New York City. And he gave it up to be a river guide. And he has now done more first descents than anyone in the history of the world. A first descent is the first person to go down a river. He's done more of those than anybody in the history of the world, and I mean by a long shot. And there's another boatman there who was worked with us on the Grand Canyon and in Chile, but he decided to go back to law school. He went to Harvard Law School, right? So they've gone like this, right? You do your passion, you do what's yours to do, and you don't care what other people have predicted for you if it doesn't fit. Their fathers, I'm sure, were not exactly happy with any of it, right? But that's it. It's your life as a divine expression of God or as a human expression of the divine God, depending on how you want to say it. Your life, your passion, your truth, where it matches, that's what's important. Do that. And you may suffer. Yes. You may lose, you may fall on your face. There's a really good chance you might eat cat food. But there's somebody who did that a long time ago. We talked about Jesus last week. It was Easter, right? Jesus comes into the Jerusalem. He's coming into Jerusalem. Any idiot, his mother could have told him it wasn't going to go well. His friends some of them probably said, I wouldn't do that. But he decides to go. The reason he's going is it feels purposeful for him. It feels like the right thing to do. Now, it may not have been mine if I was in his position, but it was his to do. He chose it. He decided that was it. He lived it. And yes, he had a bad day. I mean, a terrible day. But Lord Almighty, he turned out to be Jesus the Christ. Jesus Christ, he did that, right? You don't get to be Jesus Christ by going, well, my mama said it might be dangerous to go to Jerusalem. Do you? You have to live it your way, come what may. Do you know? And the odds are you're going to succeed, but there's absolutely no guarantee. Absolutely no guarantee. But the odds are you will succeed. Because when you make a commitment to your life, who's it, Goethe, that said this? That you draw to you unseen forces that support your commitment. But it's got to be in line with who you are, and you've got to go for it. And if you do those two things, there's a really good chance you're going to succeed. And maybe you won't have to eat cat food. Really. I mean, it may be that simple. I want to read a quote to you. I hope I can find it. Last week I talked about Brené Brown. Here's her quote. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is a source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. So we talked about vulnerability as being willing, in this case, to be yourself. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. Got to take a chance. But this one, since Tim broke the profanity barrier earlier, I should pass this up, but here we go. Steve Maraboli, and we'll end on this one. Steve Maraboli, I want to live my life in such a way that when I get out of bed in the morning, the devil says, oh shit, he's up. Let's pray. Touch into yourself. Touch in and feel. You're called for something. Your life has meaning if it's only washing the dishes, if it's just sitting still and doing nothing, if it's talking to your friends or your children, your life has meaning. The trick is to find that meaning in every little thing you're doing. And to bring that meaning, with that meaning, power and grace that can't be found without it. Let us use our unique position in the hierarchy of beings to fully express the divine by finding our meaning and being on target. And let the devil take the hindmost. And so it is. We're going to take up an offering. As with all things, as you give, so you will know yourself.